genuine conversations with unique minds on the threats, the complexity, and the geopolitics shaping our world. This is the Entropy Podcast with Francis Gorman.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Entropy Podcast. I'm your host Francis Gorman. Before we dive in, if today's conversation challenges you, sparks a new idea, or sharpens how you think about the world, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who enjoys staying curious. Today I'm joined by Francesco Chiarini, the Global VP of Cyber Resilience at Rubex. Francesco is also the founder and chair of the Special Group for Cyber Resilience, ISSA.org, which brings together nearly 2,500 members worldwide. As well as the initiator of the Global Cyber Resilience Awareness Day, he is also the founder and lead instructor for the Cyber Resilience Academy, a global pioneer in cyber resilience education that equips professionals with the skills to design and secure resilient enterprise environments. Francesco, it's absolutely my pleasure to have you here with me today.
My pleasure, Francis, and hello, everyone.
Francesco, this is a fascinating topic in the world we live in today because resilience has become such a key primer, specifically in Europe with regulations like DORA, etc., putting it in the prime spotlight. You describe your work as designing resilience to outplay adversity. What personal or professional moment most shaped that philosophy for you?
Great question. I think that what I like of the quote you just mentioned is that it contains the essence of being really resilient, right? So first of all, it's something that we must prepare for ahead of time. And there's so many constructs and principles and concepts that unfortunately professionals do not know yet, that I had the pleasure to discover over time and then to apply in big, large organizations where I worked. And so this designing, it's key because otherwise things will fall like a domino and it will be way too late. It will be way too costly to recover. So architecting ahead of time is of essence. And then to outplay adversity, and adversity here can mean many things. It's not just the non-adversarial type of events that we're used to and trained to recognize from the various standards like ISO 22301 to the traditional business continuity or disaster recovery standards, where you assume recoverability, but adversity means like a stress testing scenario where you need to remove various assumptions of recoverability. That is where third and fourth grade type of arrangements and even architectural arrangements need to live. And as well, I think it's key to speak about adversity because the way how we design programs nowadays typically relies on severe but plausible type of adverse events, cyber events, which are great for, cybersecurity in general. But here we talk about the APT-grade attacks or compound APTs. Now we see that more APT groups even get together at times. We've seen some of these in the UK, not to speak about the speed at which attacks happen today. So again, yes, I think these are fundamental principles that then define the whole philosophy that a cyber resilience officer need to, first of all, command and then bring to life through programs.
That angle and talking about the APTs that are there today, those persistent threats that we all recognize as cybersecurity professionals. Cyber resilience is often kind of discussed academically in those scenarios. What was the first real world incident that made that concept kind of come to life for you?
There's a few of them that I recall from my times working in incident response, digital investigations. And I think that's maybe a couple, probably the one that comes to life immediately is on a late weekend night. I don't remember if it was a Saturday or a Sunday, but it was getting a call as head of security operations and digital investigations of malware that started spreading at thousands of machines per second almost. and we would see the CM exploding and then the networks getting encrypted at scale. And in these moments, you suddenly realize that, well, again, in those times, I was still not in charge of architecture. That's why I switched later from security operations rather to architecture roles. But that's when you realize that the what you can do at that stage is only the product of what you prepared for, right? And so in these cases, emergency containment at scale, you may need to suddenly disconnect a whole region, not just a country even. Maybe you need to disconnect Europe. You may need to preventively disconnect a number of domain controllers. You need to, and you don't know what's going to happen, but you need to have these decisions made ahead of time. You need to have as well, I speak for this real case, you need to have predefined alternate tools that you're going to use to deploy patches or even to identify vulnerabilities, maybe some open source, different than what you have, but needs to be pre-accepted. So there's not only technical matters there, but even governance, risk management, and a lot of appetite for preparation, right? That needs to come and be set from the top. And that's what I've seen in the trenches, that oftentimes that appetite is not there. So I thought I need to spend the rest of like some part of my career, that's where I'm now at Rubrik, to help organizations shake this perception that everything we do in operational resilience and cybersecurity is enough. So there's just a lot still to do, despite many buzzwords around and many professionals that now get this awareness. But rather than awareness that then translates into real world practices in organization, it remains awareness that becomes branding or fluff, unfortunately.
You've touched on something there that I don't think we talk enough about as professionals in this space, and that is do you know what you need when what's your current state is no longer available? So can you patch, do you have the ability for out of bands communication? Can you coordinate when those systems are no longer available? Like we get caught up in the sexy stuff and strategies of AI security and having backups and all of those things, but we never think of the brass tacks. If everything is down and I need to write over images and replace, but that tooling is also encrypted or my AD is encrypted. What's my non-AD stack or my crisis stack that is
Yeah.
managed and validated? Like,
Yeah.
did that come to life for you like really hard when you start seeing, because that when you were saying thousands of malware across the state, I started to get a cold sweat. I can visualize it. It's coming to life for me.
Yes. First of all, yes, it definitely resonates, and that is the whole topic of out-of-band management of assets, right? Not even out-of-band identity, which is obviously important, and out-of-band comms, which hits at the core again of what I mentioned at the beginning, which is we cannot assume recoverability. Like this is what cyber resilience is about. Like you keep stress testing your assumptions of recoverability, but you must prepare with additional methods. So contingency planning as a science, right, which is defined pretty well in NIST publications like NIST 884 or 834 as an example. They state clearly, these are super valid despite being maybe a decade old, that these are secondary arrangements. That's good for the average threat, but for the advanced threat, you need third and fourth type of arrangements. I've seen as well situations where and worked incidents where Kerberos was compromised and you needed to rotate passwords at enterprise grade for 100,000 of laptops and identities at scale. Operations that took back then, months actually. So you need to operate somehow. So I think that I have some good news that I could bring now to the community, and for the first time, announcing it as well on the podcast, which is we're bringing together once again the cyber resilience community with ISSA, which is the International Security System Association, and I'm personally leading a work stream, which will be available. The outcome will be available for everyone, which is a restart framework. A restart framework where there is there are different layers that practically any organization can practically adopt, and it's a very well thought through list of what, from an enterprise IT standpoint, a stack that practically works in any company, and what is the sequencing? What are the criteria for you to be able to say that you move from one layer to the next layer? Is the integrity of the systems, there? What are these minimum operating requirements that a given layer needs to prepare for ahead of time? So yeah, I think that, and this will be available soon. We will announce it in the October Awareness Day, and I think that if you have been through incidents, then you are a bit privileged because you've seen what fails. If you haven't, then first of all, building your cyber resilience strategy and your cyber resilience operating model, you want people from different backgrounds. So my cyber resilience teams always had some guys from, maybe disaster recovery, some from infrastructure, from red teaming, some from the blue team, and some architects, some business continuity people. This is like the best mix for a cyber resilience team. And in terms of out-of-band management and last resort recovery, again, sometimes the basic things may be missed. For example, during your worst day, ensure that your data center recovery team, who is the one that practically will need to, after this call of the malware spreading, they may be the next one to be notified to enter the car and drive to a data center to unplug some cables, or to, for example, just connect with a properly isolated laptop, again, predisposed and set up and everything, to log in and just, to log into the interface of some of the servers and start, basically operating from there.
Very happy that you've announced the restart framework on this podcast of all. So I'm privileged. And I think it sounds like an amazing initiative. So I actually can't wait to get my hands on it and see what that entails, because I think, yeah, it just struck me as you were talking of something the industry ignores that should be kind of front and center to our resilience ambitions. When we talk about resilience, I do want to kind of poke at this one a bit. Many organizations still conflate cybersecurity with cyber resilience. How do you distinguish the two, and why does that distinction actually matter?
Thank you for the question, because it's very current, despite a lot, as I said, of noise out there on what cyber resilience is, what it isn't. The differences are actually, we can elaborate them on 4 different angles. And before even I say, I like to think about cyber resilience as an extension of cybersecurity and an evolution of operational resilience, right? First of all, the first difference is on the assets. So the assets that we protect in cybersecurity are typically the crown jewels. So the ones that when an application gets onboarded, you always ask, well, what data does it process? So it's typically the aspect of how confidential the data is, or how much available the system needs to be up and running. And that's a fair view of what carries the highest informational value, or even, as the word says, it's a crown jewel for the business bringing in the money. This is a traditional cybersecurity view, or even operational resilience view, which oftentimes tends to translate into an overly inflated list of critical assets. I can find out very quickly if you have the right governance and identification in place just by asking what's the percentage of your critical assets out of your whole CMDB, right? And unfortunately, even in big organizations, I hear oftentimes, well, it's roughly 40% or 30%. I mean, it's a very, very high number, right? And so if I hear more than 5 to 10%, typically, probably you don't have the right governance in place. The cyber resilience way of doing it is, again, you focus on really a small subset of these, but then you couple the identification and the thoroughness of the identification together with the protection. There's no point in just identifying them, just to define maybe 2 or 3 extra controls. You need to have a whole overlay of controls to protect them appropriately. And this is done through, for example, NIST 100-172, which is a great control set, again, which these gurus of cyber resilience that are out there speaking about what it is, they never heard of these protection guidelines, I bet. Unfortunately, many of them. Then the second aspect is on the risk that cyber resilience mitigates. It's not the risk of something likely to occur or the risk of impact from something that has occurred. These risk factors are already handled through NIST cybersecurity framework and many other ISO 27000 and all of these. In cyber resilience, we need to measure the risk of magnitude of impact. How bad is it going to be once something has hit? We've heard it, blast radius analysis, all of these things. Again, they sound easy. Just buy a platform that will do continuous red teaming, you have it, right? But that's more than that. It goes deeper into the topic of dependency mapping. First of all, from a logical standpoint, just you need to know what these dependencies are, and then you go and you test them, right? Then it's obviously in the selection of the threat, which we already spoke about, so I will not spend too much time, but just, cyber resilience focuses on APT-grade attacks and compound APT attacks. So there's going to be very difficult for you to justify the investment needed for these extra cyber resilience specialist products, technologies, architecture, redundancy, tertiary environments, if you are not able to clearly state what's this doomsday or 1 in 10 years type of black swan scenario going to be. And you need to be very clear about it, because this then needs to sit at the core of your cyber resilience blueprint and strategy. And this will then drive everything else. And the last and fourth step is actually the controls. Again, it's too often I hear, yes, we have a cyber resilience strategy in place. Yes, we believe it's mature. So what controls especially do you apply? What control sets do you apply that are different than traditional cybersecurity? And then typically that's where things fall apart. Like, oh yeah, well, we have MFA. Well, okay. I mean, that's standard control. Like, oh yeah, we do, phishing simulations for some users. And this is all, you see that we talk about different things. So again, the real cyber resilience strategy is the one that focuses on a very clear overlay of controls. There's a publication that I would encourage the guys out there to take a look at, which is about securing high-value assets from US CISA. It's a bit, 3-4 years old probably, but it's a nice way of describing an overlay of controls that are taken from NIST 100-160 and 172, which is something that every resilient enterprise, should adopt.
I'm absolutely going to look that up. Maybe not directly after the call, but I'm going to scribble. I'm going to scribble a little note to remind myself to pull that one out and have a read of it, because I think it's so valuable. And one of the things I really get from the podcast, talking to individuals like yourself, it's kind of looking beneath the bonnet at some of the darker areas that you're too busy to think of in your day to day. And when you say it, the light bulb comes on, and you go, oh, how did I miss that? Like, that's so obvious. Do you know what I mean? And it helps draw the dots together. And I think that's the great thing about having these conversations. It helps other people kind of go, I need to look at that a bit more. I need to probably consider it. I'm refreshing my strategy, or I'm building a new strategy. Have I thought about these things? Because they are fundamentally important, but they get lost in the noise. And there's a lot of noise out there right now. And I think, that's great insight.
Absolutely. And by the way, as well, the way how I got to know all of these things as well is, a lot of curiosity and as well a lot of luck to be connected to the right people out there. starting from one of the best thinkers out there on resilience, which is Ron Ross, who wrote NIST 116, and then many others. But I think personally very grateful to all these coaches and mentors that I met along the way, right? And then, of course, I kept super curious, and I'd love anyone who is listening to this right now. If you have any question whatsoever on anything that we're mentioning, just ping me, ping Francis, and let's have a chat. Super open to this.
Absolutely. It's the only way the community gets better and
Yes,
stronger and
absolutely.
More resilient. I have to put in that at the end.
Yeah.
Francesco, can I ask you? You spend a lot of time talking to boards and kind of executives around this topic. Is there any common misconceptions that are out there about resilience?
I think that yes, the first misconception is that, well, the understanding the board will not be able to differentiate cyber resilience and cybersecurity, or even business continuity if you don't do a good job and actually explaining it to them in these terms that even, for example, I just explained, right? They will speak about continuity and then they will mean something else, right? The scenarios will not be the ones that we actually really mean for cyber resilience. So semantics are okay, are important, but rather it's a matter of expectations. The board will want assurance, and assurance is what you provide when you continuously verify the trustworthiness of your systems and your critical applications, your critical processes. And you need to verify this trustworthiness by architecting your organization to be cyber resilient. The biggest misconceptions that I see at board level is that maybe resilience is something you can buy necessarily, or maybe something just tied to technology. Obviously, technology is super enabling a strong cyber resilience posture, but then it's even about the people that operate the processes and all of this. So I've seen great, well-financed cyber resilience programs fail because there was an overinvestment on technology and then the human factor was not counted in. Something that may surprise you. When I look and I advise many organizations on their cyber resilience strategies and plans, the structure of a cyber resilient team is nearly always different from one company and another. Like, why is that? I mean, a SOC team, the structure is almost always the same. A risk and compliance team is nearly always the same. And a security architecture team, again, it's the same. For cyber resilience, it's not, which means that maybe we are mature in saying what cyber resilience is in terms of definitions, but then in implementing it, we are still at the infancy. And what we did with NIST to mitigate this issue is that we sat down with the NIST NICE team. NICE is the framework for competencies and job definition of roles and this type of structures. And we sat down for nearly 1 year to define a cyber resilience competency area, which has nearly 200 skills and tasks and knowledge elements that a well-trained cyber resilience team needs to possess. So again, I think we need to be super clear on what are these enabling processes and the skills that the teams have, and obviously look as well at the technology.
Francesco, that's really insightful. One thing I want to kind of get into, you've touched on the human aspect of this. Can we look at that a little bit more? Because I think you're absolutely on the money that we spend huge amounts on technology and huge amounts on mobilization to put that technology in place. But the op model, the process mapping, the pressure testing, the validation pieces kind of get left to the end or forgotten about, or we run out of time to do them in a lot of places. Is that something we need to turn its head? Do we need to work the problem first with the people and then have the people in themselves be part of the project to deliver the technology, so it doesn't get landed in as part of a change function and then they walk away, and you're kind of left with the world class kit, but no muscle memory, no competency, no structure in process and how it all hangs together.
Right. I wouldn't say that we need to flip it around, because I think rather the key is in the balance and the harmony of what is being implemented. Because again, first of all, not each sector needs to equip themselves with the same capabilities, right? And the maturity level of a manufacturer, maybe at an average 3.5, more or less, out of 5, while for a top bank you need to be nearly like 4.5 maturity wise. And that's why I think that this calls for shifting from a terminology of like dimension or elements, like people, process, technology, rather towards the good balance of maturity and capabilities. And what we did with the cyber resilience capability maturity model, we brought together the best minds in cyber resilience, and we looked at a set of enablers that include organizational capabilities, things that you even need to rely upon, technology as well, for you to then build a successful cyber resilience program, as well the people, the roles, the org structures, the objectives for people. And then we define a set of capabilities that again touch technology, not only processes, a lot of processes as well. And then we started defining them with this set of experts. You'd be surprised to know that actually in order for us to assess, and we said, well, let's start simple, man. Like, let's just come up with this minimum essential list of things we need to ask someone to check if they are resilient or not and how mature they are. We ended up with 150 questions. We couldn't do less than that, though. And we meet regularly with the advisory board of the CRCMM. I encourage everyone to look it up, cr-cmm.org. It's just a free community tool. It's an Excel file you can download, and then you can assess yourself against various maturity levels. And there you can see immediately it turns into an action plan that I developed with some key guys like Patrick Lechner from Resumate, Colin Georgiou from Phoenix 24. We actually came up with this list, and it's I think what I do now with many organizations is I go around and I just showcase how they can actually use it, and then you will see that technology must be there, but as well you need to really pay attention to the capabilities that you're focusing on. One common mistake that I see organizations do is that they spend a lot on at least 5 pillars out of 6 of the NIST CSF. I hope that everyone who is listening is quite well versed on this, so I will not just explain it all from scratch. A lot of it is in prevention, protection, governance, but for recovery, the investment there is very minimal, unfortunately. And I often like to ask as well this question: how do you know how much is enough in terms of spending on these various pillars, or do you have it mapped? There's even the cyber defense matrix that helps you a bit doing it. Not sure if it has been really adopted, but just try to convert your reference architecture into dollar amounts. This is no complex exercise of cyber risk quantification or anything. Just see how much you spend in all the pillars, and then come and tell me how much you spend on recovery as a security organization. You'll be surprised. A lot of it will be delegated to infrastructure, and as a result, it's not in my budget. I just do a very light touch oversight. This is the minimum I can out of the CSF, the recovery section. I will not go even deeper into the, maybe the control the controls that I see in ISO 153, and this is already like big disservice that we make to an organization. So I suggest focus on the capabilities that then include and bring together all of these various elements, and follow a well-organized framework that is fit for cyber resilience.
Can already picture people doing the math in their head and getting squirmish in their seats right now
I hope so.
as they think about that. Francesco, I want to ask you, data vaulting and recovery are starting to kind of make a comeback, and I reckon DORA has been a big driver in that space. Is it a dangerous assumption to just put in a data backup program and hope for the best? Where do you see those assumptions kind of getting to a point where, you know, if we get ransomware, we're cool because we spent all this money on data recovery and have missed all of the other key pieces you've touched on during the conversation?
Data vaulting and isolated recovery is an interesting piece because when you look at it a bit deeper, it's one where technology and capability that is available to be implemented outpaced frameworks in a way. And so, for example, try to find data vaulting or isolated recovery into the NIST 853 baseline. You will not find it. That's a gap actually that we're now working on as well with the ICSA community led by Lorenzo Vacca and from Leonardo and a few others. So the regulations demand you to have an out-of-band or isolated backup that you can recover from, but then they most likely will not require you for a specific RTO or RPO. So potentially, if you have this backup maybe isolated in a drawer somewhere, and then you will, you will take an enormous amount of time to recover from it. Potentially, you can put in place like a compliance program and a risk team that will respond to any regulatory inquiries. And paradoxically, you will actually even be compliant with a regulation. So I think that being secure and compliant doesn't equal being resilient. So that's why nowadays programs must evolve. And I encourage anyone listening, if you have a security and risk management or risk and compliance team, you need to add resilient into the title of the team, right? And this entails and many other things. You need to then suddenly have a strategy for becoming resilient. So for data vaulting and isolated recovery, definitely, I joined as well a company that does this professionally, but I will not speak about that. The reason why this is absolutely fundamental for you to be resilient is that you need to assume that everything else is compromised, and so you must have somewhere where you can recover from. There's a great set of guidelines that the UK CMORG, the cross-market operational group from led, with FS and a few other banks. By the way, I contributed to it, and there's guidelines for well-done data vaulting, for example. You can look these up. They are vendor neutral. And there's still not a lot for on-prem, apart from what we knew of Sheltered Harbor, for example. But I think that ensure that if you have a cyber resilience strategy in place, data vaulting and isolated recovery needs to be big elements of that strategy, but they cannot be the only ones. Believe it or not, there's actually 4 goals of cyber resilience: anticipate, withstand, recover, adapt. Then there's 8 objectives. Then 14 techniques, out of which 8 account for unpredictability, meaning making your environment more unpredictable. And then there's nearly 44 combination or approaches underpinned by 30 architectural principles. So it's a bit of a longer discussion. What I learned is based on, a lot of it is based on NIST 160, which is 200 plus pages of publication, a bit complex to read, but then start from there and start trying to implementing some of these concepts. Don't try to get all of them, but for example, concepts that go beyond cyber recovery that are super important for a program are deception, or again, unpredictability. So in the way how you design the architectural blueprint for a critical asset, well, you want to have some deception in place. The other one is interoperability. So if you have an asset that you traditionally have on-prem, then in the last resort scenario, you maybe want to take the risk and convert these VMs into a cloud VM of some sort, and then move them to cloud, because maybe you don't have the redundancy in place or the extra data center you need to spin up all of this trusted recovery network.
Super insights again, Francesco. Before we finish up, can I ask you, where do you think we will be in 5 years? And is there anything that worries you with the current world? We're obviously in a lot of geopolitical tension. AI is getting widespread across the spectrum and probably undermining some of your resilience mantra there in the way speed is kind of trumping everything else. When you look forward, is there anything in particular you wish people would take away from this call, and have you anything that concerns you in the long run?
I think that the arrival rate of risks and the magnitude of the risks that we see now is unprecedented. We all know it. The way how AI is being adopted is very different region by region. I see in Europe we are adopting very fast. US as well, maybe APAC not so fast, maybe in some areas at least. And so the big suggestion would be to ensure that the fundamentals that we spoke about must be in place. Otherwise, there's no nice, shiny toy or technology or anything that will help you. So the mandate is to have like a cyber resilience platform that you have in the company that is basically a stack composed by different architectural elements, right? And need to start from there. The second concept that maybe it's going to be a bit odd to hear it, but is not actually a cybersecurity or a resilience type of topic, but is the concept of a minimum viable organization. Again, this, minimum viable bank, there are topics out there. If someone is in banking, you probably already heard it and you maybe even implement it. But then why only banks or financial institutions must be adopting this type of framework? I mean, they're not the only Fortune 1000 companies that want to protect their revenue. Of course, DORA requires you to do it. You DORA. Again, operational resilience from PRA, FCA requires you. Some regulations in the US and APRA in Australia and others. So you must have this minimum viable in place. But then there's many other organizations out there that should adopt it, because it's complexity, as we know, is the enemy of security, but as well of resilience. So start from a minimum viable company, and the starting point is going to be, once you have the first critical asset tomorrow, you're an architect, suppose, or a risk and compliance analyst, the first critical asset you review tomorrow, look at that one and first of all assess it a bit more thoroughly. Look at the blueprint of that architecture. Create 2 architecture blueprints in Jira or whatever you use. One that is the standard one you would normally do. The second one that is already at the inception of when you onboard it on a CMDB, not even going live, just inspect it deeper, question yourself of what is the threat model that I'm going to apply to then define the controls, right? And this threat model needs to be an APT-grade type of threat model. Now, if you don't know how to do it, of course, use as well some AI tools if you need. And then define what are these controls that need to apply. And then obviously, define this minimum viable architecture at upfront, right? So these would be my key takeaways. And then maybe as well, you need to have an accountable officer, an accountable, responsible person that a clear anti-pattern for me is always, I ask, so who's responsible for cyber resilience strategy in here? And well, I think the CISO does some of it, and the CISO obviously will not have all the knowledge needed, right? You need some expert on this that doesn't need to be necessarily a C-level, but it's someone who talks to the business continuity guys, to the IT infra, to risk and compliance, to all the security guys. It's a cross-functional entity that you're going to create, right? And it starts from the accountability.
I think that's a great way to finish up. This has been a super interesting conversation for me, Francesco. An awful lot of takeaways, really valuable. Thank you very much for coming on, and have a great day.
My pleasure.
Thank you.